This is the Mercedes-AMG CLA 45. And it has 680 horsepower and does 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 3 seconds. That is astounding. So what powers this beast and how is it different than the standard CLA? You're watching Autogefühl, I'm AJ, and as you can see, we have a sneak preview of both the Shooting Brake, the Estate, and the sedan version of the CLA 45. Let's take a closer look together. Up front, being the AMG, we get a different AMG grille, the Panamericana grille with these vertical slats. You get a delete of the front light bar as standard. You can option that back in, along with optioning a light pack, which will bring illumination to the outside of the grille and these vertical slats as well. This also has the Night Pack 2, there's a Night Pack 1 as well, and that of course means that a lot of the chrome or shiny elements have also been blacked out. So even the lower section of the bumper is full black, and even the AMG logo, for example, is dark chrome instead of bright chrome. On the side, we have the star pattern for the LED light signature, and of course you get the multi-beam LED lights inside. Here we have a chrome AMG badging on the Shooting Brake version. This also is a nicer color according to me. This is the Aqua Mint as compared to the Magnite Gray Magno, the matte finish. Which color do you prefer between the two? There's another difference right here that differentiates the AMG CLA from the standard CLA, and that's the track of the front axle. So this is wider for more stability and more agility. You get 19-inch wheels as standard, and these are the optional 20-inch black rims. Look really nice with the optional painted calipers as well. 4.74 meters long, so actually pretty sizable. It's not really a tiny compact car like the A hatchback. This is a pretty usable interior, as we've already seen. So I've got a chance to drive the standard CLA before, and I was quite surprised with how spacious it is. And keep in mind, the same platform is used for the GLB. So a very spacious platform in general. Flush door handles, this beautiful sloping roofline for the Shooting Brake, as they call it, for the Estate, and overall a very handsome design. What do you think? So what do you think powers the AMG CLA 45? This gives it away. The E-Performance badge right here. So yes, this is an EV, and we'll talk about specs in a minute. But here in the sedan, again, a very smooth, rounded design for the sloping roof line. Very Mercedes, no sharp edges here. But again, a lot of nice play in light and shadow and smooth areas and surfaces overall. Performance and EVs mean aerodynamics, right? That's very key. So this is also an active spoiler, and we'll take a closer look at that later on. Another key differentiator between the standard CLA and the AMG CLA is this light signature at the back. So like the front, there is a delete of the connected light bar here in the middle, but unlike the front, you cannot spec this back in. So the housing remains the same, but there are no bulbs for the LED lights in the middle, so the rear lights are just on the outside too. Not a big deal, but yeah, a small little differentiator. Further down, AMG bumper with the diffuser. No fake exhausts or any of that kind of stuff here. It's very clean and neat, and overall gives it a very powerful stance. At the back of the Shooting Brake, the spoiler is integrated into the roof edge up here, and of course a much bigger rear section that also gives you more practicality. But further down, it's pretty much the same as the sedan. So you also have this nice diffuser, which again improves the aerodynamics and also looks pretty purposeful and cool. We know there's no engine under here, so what's there instead? Actually, there's a very usable Frunk with 101 liters of volume, the same across the Estate and the sedan. Very usable space. In fact, I've been able to fit my cabin suitcase in this. So what is powering this? There are 3 Axial flux electric motors, 2 in one combined drive unit on the rear axle and 1 in the front axle, which acts more like a boost motor. The net output, remember, peak is 680 horsepower, but even a continuous power output of 612 is being something they've been able to manage with some really clever battery management, cooling, and things like that. Even the motors are very, very sophisticated. This, of course, has a bigger battery pack than the standard CLA. This has the 94 kilowatt hour net battery pack from the bigger brothers, the GLC EV platform, but repackaged to fit this platform instead. Still 800 volt architecture. So the WLTP range is claimed to be over 670 kilometers for here, the sedan, and the Estate has 640 kilometers. But from my testing of the electric CLA recently in Mallorca, those numbers are a little bit optimistic as expected. But 800 volt means you get 330 kilowatt DC fast charging, so 10 to 80% in about 22 minutes, and then AC charging up to 22 kilowatts. Now, because there are two electric motors on the rear drive unit, you can do a lot of fun stuff with software. Of course, you need a basic software differential to differential the speed and torque to the two rear wheels, but also depending on the driving mode, you can even enable different torque vectoring features, like even a drift mode. So there's a lot of different drive modes here. In fact, one drive mode which has a lot of fun features. We'll get into that in a minute. Flush door handles, which I think are pretty robust. Frameless door, and in this case, a single pane glass, not a double pane here, also for weight saving. There's another big weight saving measure, and I'll tell you about that later on. You get Art Deco and micro cut seat upholstery for the interior, which are artificial leatherette, which I think is much nicer, but you do get full animal skin leather seats if you like. But I think these are nice. I really like this playful, energetic yellow on the seat. I think just the right amount of yellow, including the cross stitching. And look at the center console. It's floating, but also that cool AMG, those stripes right in the middle. Very playful, very purposeful. Let's get inside and take a closer look. Oh yeah. I think the first thing that really grabs my attention is, of course, the steering wheel, which is new now. And as we've seen with the latest Mercedes, you have real buttons, finally. So a rocker switch and a roller here on the right side as well. Really nice to see physical buttons. And being an AMG steering wheel, you also have these extra dials. And I'll show you what that's all about. But the other aspect is, of course, as you see, there are three large screens, my digital instruments, but two 14-inch screens, one for the central infotainment and one for your passenger. We'll see what's all there to explore, so hop inside and let's take a closer look. The AMG CLA 45 doesn't lose out on practicality on the interior, which is great. So you have a reasonable glove box, just enough for your user manual and maybe a couple small items. It isn't felt lined, it is damped, but it definitely feels like it's not as nice as, for example, even the C-Class. But what I do like is this two-level center console. So you have a tray down here, maybe to keep a larger iPad or some books or things like that, even with a little strap. There are the USB-C ports down here, which are a little bit fiddly to use. So you have to make sure you have those plugged in before you set off, or you have somebody in the passenger seat who can do it for you. But the good news is you can actually thread the cable up this way, and there's a little port right here. So you don't have the cable coming from the outside and it's not fumbling with your feet, which is pretty cool. I like that small detail that Mercedes has paid attention to. In any case, though, you have an inductive phone charging pad right there. There are two cup holders with spring-loaded adjustable kind of clamps to put your drinks. This padded center armrest, which opens, and it's a pretty deep center console down here, and even a little tray that you can slide around. So overall, good practicality. This optional passenger screen, of course, is useful for long rides when the passengers get bored. They can watch Autogefuel on YouTube, for example, and keep themselves entertained. They can also see things like navigation, look for weather updates, and maybe even some email and things like that. So it's nice to have, but Let me know in the comments if you would spend the extra money to have something like this. Because here in itself, there is so much going on. This, of course, has the latest MB.OS with a lot of connected tech, over-the-air updates, AI integration, and Google built into the back end. Overall, very handy, very useful, very high performance touchscreen. But I want to talk a little bit about the AMG specific apps that we have. So you have an AMG setup. So here you can choose the individual components, for example, the suspension damping, the sound profile, which I'll tell you a little bit about in a minute, and different kinds of things like the throttle response. So you can customize each of the different modes to how you would like it, the steering wheel, kind of the buttons that we have, so on and so forth. So you can set that up. There's also a performance app. Look at that animation of a watch for the chrono. So you can really use a virtual digital clock here to time your laps or your 0 to 100 to ensure that you're still being able to hit that 3-second mark. You can see different things like a G-force meter and your aero and so on and so forth. Another cool app that they have is the AMG Track Pace, and this gives you, of course, the drift mode, yay, the drag mode, also yay, but a specific track mode. And more than a mode, what this does is basically they have pre-programmed different tracks around the world that you might be attending a track day at, like Hockenheimring or the Nürburgring or things like that. And because they have modeled that, they will you can tell the system how many laps you're planning to do, and it will give you even, recommendations on when to brake, when to hit the accelerator. So it's really like a video game. And of course, it's also using your actual driving style and all the different sensors of the battery temperature, the speed, so on and so forth, to maintain high performance capability of the battery so that you have the chance to do high endurance and high performance laps. So really sophisticated tech going on here. You can directly connect this to your Instagram and it will video you sitting inside with, of course there's a camera inside. Why wouldn't there be? So there's a camera here, so it'll video you, record you as you're driving your lap, and also the cameras outside, and make a quick composite little reel for your Instagram. So a lot of gamification, a lot of interesting features. But yeah, if you have an AMG, this is what it's all about. It's about that performance mindset, and they've really tried to capture that as much as possible. All right, so there's a lot of AMG apps. That's cold, that's facts. How do I feel like this is a real AMG? Well, they've thought about that. They have recorded 1,600 audio files of the 2-liter turbo 4 petrol from the AMG A45S, and they have simulated all those sounds to mimic how you would be driving. That's pretty common. We've seen these kind of artificial sounds before, but it goes a few steps further. It also simulates gear shifts, so it even dips the power, so there's an interruption in the power and the traction to give you that simulation of a gear shift. And they've put little vibrators on the seats to kind of, up here actually, to vibrate depending on the acceleration. So it's supposed to mimic the same 2-liter turbo 4 petrol engine that comes in the A-Class hatchback. All right, to activate all this gamification, I use the dial here to go from comfort to the AMG Force Sport Plus mode. So there's S. Did you hear that? There are actually sound bars on the front and the outside of the car, so it actually is piping the sound to the outside. So how do you feel about people that you're driving by hearing that? There is sound being pumped inside as well through the speakers, but it's quite evident that the sound is on the outside. So let's take a listen. Even with the little crackle and pops, I'm not buying it, to be honest. Maybe I'm just too old. Maybe I'm too traditional. Let me know what you think. And the seat vibration, to be honest, is very subtle. So it's not too prominent. It's very subtle. You feel it's there. And yeah, unfortunately, I cannot drive today. We're here in the studio. So I'm also curious to see how the brake, not the brake, sorry, the gear shift simulation, how that functions. Speaking of braking, they also have really good brake recuperation. But again, we'll save all of that to when we actually get our chance to drive and test this. Down here, there's another dial. For example, this controls the spoiler. So I can manually raise it or lower it if I like. But again, depending on the mode, so if I'm in the Sport Plus mode, for example, then the system automatically raises the spoiler. And I can also use this dial for other things, like I can change the sound profile and the suspension setting. So there's a little screen inside here as well. Of course, what I really am happy to see is the return of these buttons, like I mentioned, and it's really easy to use. Even these are buttons down here. There are paddle shifters for the fake gear changes, but also there's a boost function. And again, we'll try that out once we're actually driving. Digital instruments, which are really handy because you can change between some really nice different views. For example, to have the map, you can have the more performance-oriented AMG view or a more classic Mercedes dual dial setup. So in the sedan, this roof tapers quite a bit already here. So let's see how that translates to headspace. The door cutout is also pretty small, so I do have to bend and tuck myself in. It's not too bad. I am 5'8" or about 1.73 meters. This is set to my driving position, so I have enough knee room. I don't have so much place to slide my feet under the front seats. I also like to have my seat in a slightly lower position. Actually, headroom is not too bad. I'm not touching the top, but if you're 6 feet tall, like Thomas, then you would probably be very close to touching this. They've used a very common trick that EVs have these days, which is providing a big, massive panoramic glass roof. And this way they're able to liberate more headroom, but also make it seem more bright and airy. But that's also because there is a huge battery pack, right? This is a skateboard architecture, as most EVs are today. So the floor is a bit higher. So as you see, I'm a little bit knees up. It's not bad. It's expected. But what is a bit unexpected is this. What is this? There's actually technically no middle seat. This is not homologated as a 5-seater. This is only a 4-seater. Remember I was saying they're going to do some more weight saving? Well, this is it. Because of the extra weight of the battery pack and all the extra motors and everything else that they've had to pack in here, they had to choose between performance or allowing for a 5th passenger and to account for that. So they said, you know what, let's stick to 4 passengers and we'll add the extra performance. I get it. This is an AMG. If you don't want, if you want 5 seats, get the standard CLA. That's also pretty quick as well. But yeah, you have a central armrest. You still have 2 Isofix child mounts on the side, although these are the slightly cheaper pop-out covers, so you got to be careful not to lose them. And it's also a little bit of a shame that in these very sexy looking sport seats, there is no seat back pocket, so you can't really keep those things here. Air conditioning vents and USB-C ports, which is great. No additional climate zone, however, but overall, as expected. Here in the Shooting Brake, we get to see a little bit of a different color scheme for the upholstery. This is all black with a little bit of that red contrast stitching along the sides here, and compared to that yellow. A little bit of a different inlay here without those AMG stripes. This is just like a metallic brushed aluminum finish. Which one of the two do you prefer? I'm pretty, I would say, yeah, I think both of them are okay. But this also has the Sky Control panoramic roof. So you have these little stars, which also you can actually change the colors of. So you can choose a different ambient style, and you see now it's pink. Or if I go to like this mode, it's Mercedes blue, and then there's red for AMG. But also what's pretty cool is that I can also choose the amount of dimming. So this is a electrochromatic windshield. So I can have different motifs. I can have a fully kind of blocked sunroof, so there's no sun coming through, and I can even pick and choose which specific panels, quote unquote, to, you know, make transparent and opaque. One thing I'm not so happy with the CLA is the fact that they've omitted separate window switches for the rear windows. So you have to toggle this button on to then control the rear windows, and then toggle that off to then control the front windows. Just give me two more. How much of a problem is that? I don't know. But even the shooting brake has a spoiler. So it's a little bit smaller, it's on the roof edge, but this is also active. It's also depending on the speed, and I guess it kind of looks cool too. The shooting brake has a higher roof line. That should translate to more headroom on the interior. Let's check it out. Again, this door doesn't open 90 degrees. This opening is not that wide, and it is generally a little bit short and squat. So you do have to bend to get in. Also keep in mind that this might be a bit more challenging for putting your child seats. But once you're inside, it's not too bad. Yeah, definitely have more headroom here in the Estate or the Brake than I did in the Sedan. So because of that more flat, Estate roofline. So thumbs up for that. Sky control looks really cool. Again, I just became a father. I'm sure my little baby would love to see these stars and dancing around. It'll keep him engaged on those long drives when he starts getting fussy. So why not? If you don't like them, you can just turn it off. Again, no center seat at all, not even an option. But overall, again, not the most comfortable, but if you are under 6 feet tall, you wouldn't be that uncomfortable, even on long drives. It's just not as comfortable as a C or an E-Class, of course. All right, let's take a look inside the trunk of the CLA Sedan. This is 405 liters of space, and this height is about 90 centimeters, which is actually pretty useful. So this height allows you to stack maybe even some suitcases, like cabin suitcases, on their side. Plenty of space, and as you can see, you can also tumble the seats in a 40-20-40 manner. And there is not much of a lip. There's a little bit of a ramp here, but overall it's very flat, so you can easily carry long items. Not such tall items though. Of course, if practicality is more important to you, the shooting brake, the Estate, is the logical choice. This is 455 liters of volume. And of course, if I were to put the seat down, that becomes a whole lot more. And again, similar ramp here, but overall a lot of space, and this height is where you get a lot more extra usability. Personally, I would trade off the slightly slower 0 to 100 and the slightly heavier weight for this added practicality of the shooting brake. But what about you? Which one of the two would you prefer? On paper, the new Mercedes-AMG CLA 45 has the power output to really knock the competition out of the park. But what about the weight? What about the actual driving sensation? Make sure you're subscribed, because once we actually get our chance to drive this in the real world, we can give you a more definitive review. Overall, you know, electric performance cars have been around for a long time, even the AMG GT, even the Ferrari. I don't need to get into that. There's a lot of controversy with, for example, even the design of the front Panamericana grille nowadays. But you know what? If this is the future, we have to accept it, and I'm all here for it. I'm just curious how this will perform. If you're not looking for an AMG CLA, make sure you watch my review of the standard CLA, or its even more practical cousin, the GLB, because I came away quite impressed. And if that's anything to go by, I think this will be a success as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.